Did you know that before the murders in the Grant Amato case, his family reportedly became so desperate they started treating his internet use almost like a drug addiction intervention? Not joking around, actually panicking. And according to testimony, they reportedly took devices away, restricted internet access, cut off money, forced conversations about therapy, and at one point, they even removed him from the house completely. Because they believed the obsession with the Bulgarian cam model was consuming his entire life. And honestly, that was a detail that changes the atmosphere of the entire case. Because at first, the story sounds ridiculous. Some guy spending money on a cam girl online. But then you look a little deeper and you realize that the family allegedly believed he was psychologically disappearing in front of them. And that's much darker. One of the reasons this case hit people so hard online is because the emotional mechanics underneath all of it felt uncomfortably modern. And according to prosecutors, Grant allegedly spent over $200,000 connected to his obsession. And you know what's strange? Is that the people following the case could emotionally understand pieces of the behavior long before they understood the scale. Because millions of people already live partially online emotionally, escaping online, feeling understood online, building fantasy versions of themselves online. The difference here is that the emotional escape reportedly became stronger than reality itself, and that's a scary part. A lot of people went into this case expecting the cam model to turn out to be some sort of manipulative mastermind, but from everything publicly available, she actually seemed much more emotionally detached from the situation than people expected, which almost makes the story a little bit more frightening, because it suggests the relationship may have existed far more intensely inside Grant's mind than in reality itself. And honestly, this is where the case becomes psychologically fascinating. Once somebody emotionally starts converting paid attention, scheduled interaction, messages, online validation into love, future, identity, and meaning, reality slowly starts losing authority. The money doesn't even emotionally feel like money anymore at that point. It starts feeling like proof. Proof that the relationship matters, proof that the connection is real, and proof that fantasy can survive. And honestly, the darkest part about this case might even be the family itself. Because according to the testimony, they didn't ignore the situation. They actually tried, and repeatedly. You could almost feel the exhaustion building as the story progresses. At first, it was probably confusion. Like, where's all this money disappearing to? And then embarrassment, then panic, then eventually something worse. The realization that normal conversations no longer seem to reconnect him to reality. And that's terrifying for families, especially because people watching the case started imagining, what if this was my son? What if somebody I loved emotionally drifted away this far while still physically sitting in the same house? That's what gives this story emotional weight. It's not just the murders, the helplessness beforehand.
And that's put young men in particular who are very susceptible to visual sexual imagery, far more than young women, by the way. So the literature on this is quite clear. Men and women both use pornography, but men use images and women use stories. And
The interrogation footage afterwards became another huge obsession online. Because Grant didn't emotionally behave the same way you'd expect someone of murdering their family to behave. He didn't come across explosive. He didn't come across theatrical. If anything, he almost looked emptied out, detached in a way people found difficult to explain. And interviewers kept replaying clips trying to figure out what they were actually looking at. Was it shock, exhaustion, perhaps fantasy collapse, or even maybe disassociation? Because the case almost feels less like sudden violence and more like somebody slowly eroding psychologically while ordinary life continued around them. That's what makes it eerie. This case feels uniquely modern because almost every layer of the collapse happened digitally. The attachment, validation, and fantasy happened online. Even the money moved online. The emotional world itself reportedly existed mostly through screens. And honestly, That's why people found this story very unsettling in a strange way, as if he was possessed by the screen itself. And people recognize pieces of themselves in smaller forms in all this: doom scrolling, parasocial attachment, online escape, living emotionally through screens. That recognition made the case linger. And honestly, I think we could all collectively agree that someone looking like Grant Amato entering the Florida prison system with those crimes makes the story even darker, because he didn't seem to be emotionally built for environments like that. He appears passive, withdrawn, socially awkward, internet dependent, the kind of person who emotionally survived through avoidance and fantasy. Now, imagine that personality entering a world built around routine, dominance, constant observation, and institutional control. One thing prison destroys extremely quickly is escapism. There's nowhere to disappear mentally anymore. No campsites, no fantasy future, no emotional world online waiting for you at night. Just concrete routine and reality every single day. And whether people admit it or not, part of what keeps audience obsessed with this case is imagining that collision. What happens when somebody who escaped reality for years suddenly gets trapped inside nothing but reality? That question hangs over the whole story. One thing the defense reportedly struggled against was that prosecutors allegedly had something modern juries find extremely persuasive: digital structure, financial records, timeline reconstruction, searches, movement, behavioral patterns. And once modern evidence starts reinforcing a narrative from multiple directions at once, juries emotionally harden very quickly, especially in family murder cases. At that point, defense attorneys aren't only fighting evidence anymore, they're fighting a version of reality that already emotionally makes sense to people. That's incredibly difficult to reverse. The fatal detail in the Grant Amato case wasn't simply obsession. It was the moment fantasy reportedly became emotionally more powerful than ordinary reality itself. Because once somebody allegedly stops valuing family, money, future, shame, consequence, more than the emotional escape world inside their own head, reality slowly loses authority. And to be fair, that's what makes this case stay with people, not just the murders. The realization that modern loneliness, internet intimacy, emotional isolation, humiliation, and digital escape can quietly pull somebody so far away from reality that by the time the physical consequences finally arrives, the psychological collapse may have already happened long before anyone fully understood it.
Got you a duck, you put their foot on his neck. You know what I'm saying? If he weak, if he weak, you better check in and go on PC somewhere. You know, because it's